evening of the blues, you know. Yes, indeed. Yes, sir, and madam. You know, like I know, that they are in the house, looking over us, and that's a plus. Yes, can you feel their warm spiritual vibes? I'm talking about the blues greats of the past whose musical innovations will forever last. Hey, these who you see assembled here at the table will be involved in a very, very unique discussion this evening, discussing the blues in the African diaspora. And Aretha Reddy, of course, is responsible for having the 9th annual Big Eye Blues Festival, and starting here at Jazz 966. How about a big hand for Aretha Reddy? Yes, indeed. Because she's a unique lady that's been going around singing the blues in this big town. And the feeling that she delivers is most profound. Now, the blues divas of yesteryear are brought to mind as she sings the songs of old in a most divine way, I do say. And of course, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to introduce the moderator so we can get the show on the road. And that will be Miss Yasmin.
Okay, that's Yasmin.
Yes,
Yasmin. That's Yasmin Bowe-Woods.
This is so tiny.
Okay.
Miss Yasmin Woods.
Thank you. I don't know if this is working.
It's not on.
This one is on.
Hello? Okay. Still not on. Okay, well we'll just pass this one. Okay. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time to climb those stairs to 966 Jazz. I am so grateful to be here. This is where I first met Aretha Reddy performing the classic blues women, and I was totally smitten with her style. So she asked me to moderate this panel, and we had a very lively discussion last year, so we decided to do it again this year. This year our theme is Blues in the African Diaspora, and we have a very interesting panel to discuss this topic. To my far right is Ms. Regina Mullen, who is a blues aficionado, as well as a publisher, a photographer, and a visionary. And we are so grateful that she agreed to be on the panel. And next to Regina is Dr. Delridge Hunter, professor at Medgar Evers College in CUNY. And this gentleman told me that he knows his subject. So we can expect to have some very deep insight into this theme about blues in the African diaspora. And I'm really looking forward to his thoughts on this subject. He is also a writer and a brilliant thinker. So welcome to the panel, Dr. Hunter. And next to Dr. Hunter, to my right, is the great performer, Madam Pat Tandy, who is very well known in this region. She is a gospel singer and a blues singer and a very intense performer. And so I'm hoping that her thoughts on this subject are as intense as her energy on the stage. And to my left, last but not least, is my good friend, Dave Rubin, who is a blues lover and also musician, who has pretty much dedicated his life to speaking and investigating the blues. He has written books and articles and has done many lectures on the subject, and we're so happy that he agreed to be on this panel this evening. That is Dave Rubin. And so we can begin. So what we're going to do is we're going to have each one of the panelists share a couple of minutes of their thoughts on this theme about blues in the African diaspora. And, I hope that the insight that you gain tonight will broaden your scope on the blues, and also I hope that it will bring you closer to the blues. So I'm going to open up with Regina. All right, so Regina, can you just give us some insight on the theme of blues in the African diaspora? And I'm going to pass you the mic.
Thank you. Hello, and thank you. I guess I would like to start with part of the reason that I'm on this panel, and I do admit to being a spring chicken with an AARP card. The blues for me as a baby boomer is about a conversation, and a conversation that my parents had with us, a conversation that their parents had with them, about how to survive in America as an African American. So for me, blues is about the African American experience first and foremost. The blues is also about culture. It's about where we've been and where we're going. It's not just a musical form. It never was in our home. But music is kind of where people like to believe the blues is located. So when we talk about blues in the African diaspora, I really talk about blues in the African American diaspora, which of course includes the African component, but I think there's something unique about the African American experience that makes the blues the special music that it is and the special cultural conversation that it is. So when we talk about diasporic culture, we talk about movement, right? The whole point is how culture moves and how conversations are shared. And so for me, the point of continuing to talk about the blues is to continue that conversation. And the conversation both internally within the United States, but certainly in other countries who pick up pieces of the conversation, as well as places outside of the United States that are interested in the African American conversation. So I'll leave it at that, and we can flesh it out later.
Thank you. I became involved in really looking at the music after we had done this documentary called The Jazz Worker in 1986. I started to look at the roots of the music because I know it's the roots of all popular music in the Western world right now. And I decided to read the literature to see what everybody said, only to find that except for about 5 books, everybody said it came after slavery, during Reconstruction, and it was work song and spirituals that invented it. I said, what? What are you talking about? I couldn't believe it. All of these writers, and I looked at their bibliographers, and they all had cited each other. None of them had gone to any primary data except for a guy named Fisher, and his primary data was 1945, and much of it was inaccurate. So I could not believe that this was the state of the intellectual discussion around this music, so I decided to do my own research. And I talked to a few people. Jerry Eastman told me about this collection that's in the Library of Congress called Born in Slavery. You might want to look that up, Born in Slavery. slave narratives from the Federal Writers Project 1936-1938. And he also told me that the musicians, which I had seen as a child in Texas, I grew up in Texas, so I saw the music firsthand while I was in college at Purview. Purview was an all-black college then, near Houston. We would go down to Fifth Ward Club Matinee and watch Lightning Hopkins perform because he could inform impromptu. All you do is give him a subject. And this guy would write a tune right there on the spot. We couldn't believe it. We would just try to stump. We would sit there and try to stump him with any topic, and then whatever you brought up, he could write a song right now, composed it right in front of you, deliver it, and have new verses for it each time. So I decided to look at the slave narratives to see what the people during slavery had to say about the music, only to find out that there were hundreds of stanzas of music that people had sung to the investigator who talked to them. They would sing and some would say, well, I'm through, I'm not going to tell you anymore, I'm through with this. But the idea was that the music did not exist and that it came from spirituals. Made no sense because Africans didn't make those distinctions. They used the minor tone, the three minor tones, the three traditional tones that are used by the rest of the world today came from Ethiopia. They came from Ethiopia. They're the Ethiopian scale, the harmonic minor scale, and the pentatonic scale. Those three traditional scales we brought with us, and we sang them as we performed. Now, we were not singing a work song. We were working while we were singing, which means we were singing either blues or spiritual. We had those two genres first. We added two more around the antebellum called the freedom songs, which are Jubilee, which is, by the way, Go Down Moses and Swing Low Sweet Chariot. Those are freedom songs. And the country. We sang country. So it's no accident that I was angry when these European Americans started getting all the credit for music that we were singing during slavery. We had the fiddle. See, we brought the string instruments with us. We have numerous string instruments that we had invented in Africa, and three that survived are the guitar, banjo, and the fiddle. The others didn't survive the Atlantic movement. They died over through the ages, and those three survived. The thing is, what happened was with the banjo, it was converted by two Englishmen into another instrument, so it didn't perform the role that the normal that the blues sound had performed before, so they moved to the guitar. But let me go back. So what I did was I started looking at the music and listening to what the people were saying. And what is so interesting is that as in the music, when I started to hear it, they would do a first word in the stanza. The first stanza they would give, then they would give another right after, and the next stanza would not be anything like the first one, quite. It would be nearly like it, but they would see if you were listening. And Lightning had that practice quite frequently. He would make sure that you were paying attention to him because he would say something the first time while you're talking. And when you now want to hear what he said, he would say it, but he would say it with maybe another couple of words in there that gave a different meaning. And we found that very fascinating that he could do this. He showed us how to play the music like no one else because we could sit there and watch him perform. He learned from Charlie Christian. He was a student of Charlie Christian and a friend of Charlie Christian, so he knew how to play the music like no one else. And he played his own guitar and performed by himself, usually on the stage, during the Friday afternoons that we were down. But the music now, as we understand it, is the base of all music, including hip-hop, or Afro-pop, or reggae, or Afro-Latin, or Latin jazz, or whatever you want to call it. It is the base of all that country. It is the base of soul, rock and roll, rhythm and blues. All of that came out of blues. All of that has as its parent blues. And we have to understand that. So we have to understand these new genres of music are not really new except they're extension of the old form, done in more modern, different ways. that have very little to do with the fact of them being separate and individualistic and original. They're not original. None of the new forms are original. They can all attribute what they do to the past music that came with us through the Middle Passage. It came with us. They sang it. The ship sailors complain about hearing these people making these very sad groans and moans. They were singing blues. They talked about them when they were on the river rowing a captain. I remember there's a colonel who said, well, what happened was that they sang this verse and then they got to the chorus and they seemed to have forgotten the verse because they kept repeating that over and over, and I laughed. I said, you dumbass. That's what we do. That's what we do. We'll start doing that and everybody gets the groove and they get into the mood and they know what's happening, so you don't have to go any place other than there. So these became very interesting things that I found out. And I won't say any more until we have discussion, but I just wanted to let you know. I got into writing. I've written 6, 7, 8 articles. 5 are going to be in encyclopedias. The others I've written for Pure Jazz and some other venues. But the music I now write on quite frequently because I find that most of the information is uninforming. And by the way, I use African American to be anyone of the Western Hemisphere of African ancestry. I don't use the American arrogance and call only United States people American. I think that's very insulting to the Canadians and to the Mexicans and to the Brazilians and the Venezuelans. They all live in America. We all live in America, just like France and England are in Europe. So we have to remember that. So as far as our club, when we set up ourselves in 1966 at Northern Illinois University, we said we would call ourselves the African and African American organization to include everybody in the Western Hemisphere, and that's how you'll use the term. Also, black and white. Black and white I use as in chess. When I say white, I mean position. When I say black, I mean position. Other than that, you're European American, I'm African American, and the other Americans have that title too. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hunter. I have learned quite a bit from just listening to you, Dr. Hunter. My background in blues is not extensive, but I can sing some blues now. Maybe I won't even admit to that. I'm not as old, and I don't go back that far, but I have seen all the different genres that have developed from blues on and on. And it keeps changing, seems to me, every day, but I understand, what you said, and I really can appreciate what you said, coming from, not from spirituals or work songs or something like that, the blues, but from people from Ethiopia or the different rhythms that have come from that. I have seen that too. I've heard different songs too that have developed like that. And all I can say is I can sing some blues, and I'm glad to be on this panel to learn more, about the blues. And I'm ready to hear some more. So yeah.
Thank you, Pat. Okay, so I'm going to pass the mic over to Dave Rubin.
Thank you, Yaz. And I want to say right off, I'm honored to be here as part of this panel with my distinguished colleagues. I'd like to comment, first of all, on Dr. Hunter, what he said about Lycan Hopkins. I was fortunate to see him once in the village, actually. He was old, it wasn't, but at least I got to see him, and I agree he's one of the great legends, and he's well respected for that ability to make songs up, to make lyrics up on the spot. And if I'm sure people here tonight, if they're here for the blues, they know who Lycan Hopkins is. If they don't, they should go find out. Go to YouTube. There's lots of his songs on YouTube. He's near the top. So I would like to say that I come from a different background, and I come than anybody else up here from their descriptions of them coming to the music. I come to it through rock and roll, like a lot of people, a lot of baby boomers, by the way. And when I started learning about the blues, I realized that all the rock and roll that I liked the best, and it spoke to me, was the one that had the strongest blues elements in it. And over the years, I started researching and going back as far as saying, well, where are the roots of this? And finally, when I got back to the blues, I realized, well, this is what I've wanted all along. This is the music that really speaks to me the most. And it's the most important thing to me outside of my family and my friends. And I think it's very important. I'm dedicated to teaching people about it, getting them to appreciate it. We all have different opinions, I see from my colleagues who've spoken before me, about even what the blues even is. And I think I probably have a slightly different one, or maybe a little bit broader. And I think that's good. As Regina said to me privately, it opens the discussion, and we should have a discussion. And that's what we're up here for. One of the main points that I like to make in my writings and talking to my students about the blues is to say that this is American music. In other words, this music was developed here. None other than Buddy Guy, Bo Diddley, and John Cephas, the late John Cephas, said to me, blues is American music. It's got roots, clearly, in Africa and other places too. But this is American music. It developed here. Now, I see that as a positive thing, because I see it as a way to bring us together, to bring people together, and I think blues can do that better than any other music. It speaks to the soul. I think Baretha used that term, music of the soul. Yes, Baretha, I love that. Right. I love that term.
Thank you.
Music does speak to all the souls, and I think it can be a great way to bring people together. And I try to express that in my teaching and my writing. And I also think we really need to teach the young people about it, starting as young as can be, so they know, as Dr. Hunter said, it is the roots of all American music. There's no question about that. I think it's the ultimate original American art form, and it should be lauded for that and respected. And it is the glorious legacy of African Americans, originally and primarily, without question. So that's a little bit of an overview of what I think about it, and I look forward to continuing our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. So, on taking all of that in, it's a very interesting thought that this music has so much power and longevity. I hear people all the time, especially young people, who really are not very well educated in culture, telling me that they don't like the blues. And I say, okay, well, what do you like? And then I say, well, I see you grooving to those TV commercials. And from my calculation, I would say about 80% of every commercial is using the blues to drive their message. Because the blues is organic. It grabs you in the groin. Okay? And I will tell anybody, I've lots of musicians in my life, and many of them don't understand the blues. And I tell them, the guys anyway, this is kind of nasty, but I tell them, well, if you want the girls to drop their panties, play the blues. Okay? Because I've been to many blues concerts and I've seen lace laying up on that stage. I never saw that happen at a jazz concert. Maybe a rock concert, because rock stars. But most of that is, really grounded in the blues because it's organic music. So I would like to just entertain some more thoughts from my, very astute panel members. Does anybody have anything, specific that they'd like to add to their presentation? Regina?
I do, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Following up on one thing you said about the organic nature of the blues, one of the things that drives the work that I do is the concept of cultural equivalence, which means that blues as part of culture is no better, but certainly no worse than any other. And a lot of the analysis and description of the blues, particularly as primitive, as uncultured, as the music of field Negroes, assumes that it is less than. And when you describe it in terms of, one of my pet peeves is the description of the violence in the blues, as if the culture in general was not violent. The description of maladaptive behavior, as if the entire culture was adaptive and the blues was somehow less than. So opening up the discussion about the blues, I think, requires that we have a level of respect for the culture that stems from the idea that there is no better culture than that from which the blues came, but it is not superior to any other culture. The trick, to get back to the organic thing as to why it grabs people, is that, we have inventors around the globe. And it just so happened that the African American crucible was the environment in which the key to reaching out to people from all around the world came. So without the horrific terrorization of slavery, without the movement across the water, without the sense of freedom, that the spiritual life gave people, the sense that, hey, we can, there's something better that we can get. I don't think we would have had the blues. But that's what culture is. It's part of growth and movement. So I would want to add that, but it's not primitive.
That's very good. That's what it was. The bourgeoisie of the African American population did not like blues. They thought it was sinful. It was devil's music. These are devil songs. That's why nobody discovered it when they were looking for it. They didn't know to look for devil songs. All you had to do was know if they said devil songs, they had to be talking about blues. One thing I found from my friends from Africa, I have a number of friends from the different countries there, and I've spoken with them personally and let them hear the music. One was from Congo, the other one was from Ethiopia, and the third one was from Ghana. The brother from Ethiopia performed for us one evening. We take our students to dinner at different restaurants. And this particular year, Don Penkele, my friend, who was a professor at Medgar, took his students to this Ethiopian restaurant on 120th in Amsterdam. I don't know if it's still there. Oh, okay. And our other friend, who was Ethiopian professor, invited his musicologist friend, who's Ethiopian, from the University of Maine. He performed 45 minutes. You will swear you were listening to the John Lee Hooker. 45 minutes on a harp, playing all in those same tones. So afterwards I went up and I said, hey brother, so you've been listening to Delta Blues. He said, you know what, you're the third person who said this to me. I now must listen to it. No, it's 2,000, 3,000, I don't know how many thousand years it is old. I'm letting everybody know that. No, we didn't do it here. We brought it with us and we don't need to apologize for that. because it was a very informing music, as I said, even to the guys on the ship. They had to listen. They would cry. The master would cry when the guy, there's a sister who's in the Jubilee Singers. She gave one of the I'm Troubled in Mind. She gave the actual first rendition of it to George White, who was the director of the Fifth Jubilee Singers. She gave it to him, and she said, every time my father got a beating and he sang this, everybody, including the master, cried. So that was evident that it was going on during the time, and we just brought it forward. And like I said, it had to go underground. The music wasn't really known very well because, as I said, the race people, that's who they were. These people believed in protecting who we were, and I have a lot of respect for that. But they did not like the people who were working class and who sang this vulgar music that was primitive and that didn't make no tones that they could understand and had a beat that they could not. They did not understand that when they came to New York and went to the Lafayette Presbyterian or one of those churches, all the European Americans were sitting there because they knew it was advanced and that they could not do any of the beats of the time measures that they were doing. So they were sitting there trying to listen to try to get this syncopation that they heard, that they were trying to beat to it. They couldn't do it. They couldn't do the 2/4. They didn't have any idea of what these people were doing. So they were there as informed listeners. The African American bourgeoisie was there as critics. They were looking through the glass and thought that the Europeans wouldn't like it. Therefore, they had to change it. So what did they do? They created Negro spirituals. Negro spirituals are nothing but European songs. They changed the old spirituals and the old freedom songs into Negro spirituals for glee clubs. I know because I was in one at Prairie View. So I don't have to debate it. That was not spirituals that the people sang in the churches, because when they would come, when their children would come through to perform, they would say, you know, that was good music, but what was it? What were they singing? That wasn't anything that they were accustomed to. It was in Thomas A. Dorsey, Georgia Thomas. When Thomas A. Dorsey left the church, got hooked up with Ma Rainey in Chicago, started performing that music, that he brought the music back to the church. After he played with her and went through his illness, he had an epiphany, and he brought it back to the National Baptist Convention. Many of you don't know who that is anyway. Their president was named Jackson also, but he did not support civil rights. He had 6 million members, 6 million members of the Baptist Convention. Thomas A. Dorsey tried to introduce the music, and he turned it down. So he went down to St. Louis, and he got a choir, and he worked with that choir, and he brought them back the next year, and now history has changed. We went back to the old spirituals, and we call them gospel. So we have to learn the history very carefully, because if we don't, we end up misguiding the people we're trying to educate about what they should know about the music, and they don't really find out what they should really know. All of the music has to have that blue tone. The tone cannot allow you to be very expressive. You can be very sad with it, or you can do it the way John Coltrane does it, or you can do it the way Eric Dolphy does it, or you can do it the way Miles Davis does it. But see, it's like it's so variable and so expansive that it doesn't matter what you want to do with it in terms of emotion. The blue tones, the minor tones allow emotion to be expressed in music. That's the role they tend to play. And since they're so good with that, it's good to have it as a part of the American culture, because the music would have been so dead if we had not been here in order to give this kind of music to the population to listen to. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Pat, do you have anything to add?
I'd like to add a little something. Yeah. I enjoyed what you said, you know, regarding the roots of the blues, but I've never really took it to the root of the blues for me to bring it out to sing. You know, I never looked into like the history of the blues. I thought everybody loved the blues, you know. From my parents coming up, I know they loved the blues, my mom and dad. I would hear a blues tune come on and like Muddy Waters or one of those people, Howlin' Wolf, yeah. And all I can hear them saying is, oh yeah, oh have mercy. You know, they love the blues, ah yeah. And I just wanted to see what in the world they were talking about. You know, just listening to those tunes, you could feel it, you know. You didn't have to understand what they were talking about, but the music was right there for you to feel it. And that's what I was always into, just feeling the music. And coming up, I would sing those tunes too, and I loved the stories that they told. You know, there's so many stories, sad stories, happy stories, funny stories. What really got me into it was, you know, to sing it. And to hear young people that would be around saying they didn't like the blues, it was not until I started singing it, you know, or they started singing it, they really loved it too. You could hear them singing nothing but that. You know, they loved to sing those funny tunes, or the tunes that everybody was singing around them, the blues, you know, and they could relate to that. And I can't understand why anybody would say they don't like the blues, you know. If you don't like the blues, you got a hole in your soul. That's what they would say. Yeah, so that's all I just want to add to that. You know?
Thank you.
All right.
So that was great. You know, I grew up in the 60s and the 70s, and when I was a kid, my grandmother and my mother, they used to sing these songs. And, I mean, you know, I grew up in, you know, like as soon as I was in school, I was in a white school. And so I grew up around a lot of white people. And so I didn't understand the depth of the music that my family was singing. I was like, you're not hip. You're not cool. You know, it's too much angst going on there. And it took me a long time to understand how much blues, first of all, that they were singing the blues. That was number one. They were singing the blues. And they were talking about people that I now know about, who were people who were pioneers of the blues, and they were talking about classic blues women, who Beretha Reddy does a phenomenal show, the classic blues women. And women in this continent were really very significant in pushing blues forward in America. You know, someone mentioned Ma Rainey, and, you know, Bessie Smith, and Victoria Spivey, and who's that? Alberta, oh yeah, Alberta Hunter. I mean, and it, you know, the list goes on and on, which is pretty astounding for me because, you know, I wasn't tuned into that when I was younger. And I had to, you know, grow up and then start listening to everything and going, oh my God, wait a minute. There goes blues notes, there goes blues, blues, blues. And I was really into rock and roll. And I really didn't understand until later how much of the rock and roll that I was crazy about was all blues. You know, speeded up, twisted around, and, you know, and I start thinking of some of the songs that Mick Jagger sang. And I'm like, oh my God, you know, he's doing his English version of the blues. So I am so happy that I understand a lot more now. And I really appreciate the historical context that, you know, Dr. Hunter is sharing with us this evening. Thank you very much. And so I just want to know if Dave wants to say anything else.
I would. Okay. Two things. Something Regina said about, you know, one of the criticisms of the blues of it primitive, simple, And it reminded me of something that B.B. King once said to me in an interview, and I had the pleasure of interviewing him many times. By the way, I understand, I don't think he's doing real well at the moment, so we should have our thoughts and prayers for B.B. He said, yeah, the blues is a simple music, anybody could play it, but would you want to hear anybody play it? No. I think we could agree to that. And as far as simple, rhythmically and melodically, it couldn't be more sophisticated. With, again, the blue notes that Dr. Hunter was mentioning, but the phrasing, the microtones, the notes in between even the blue notes, and the syncopated rhythms that are, I write books for guitar players with music in it, and to get that down on paper is almost impossible, to tell you the truth. And that's one of the things that makes it so special. So I don't think any of those terms apply. It's actually the most sophisticated music. And the other thing I wanted to comment on was what Dr. Hunter said about the different responses to the blues, say in the African American community back when. And I'm reminded of a story that W.C. Handy told. People call W.C. Handy the father of the blues. I don't know about that. I guess we could debate who's the father of the blues, if there even is one. But he did publish the music pretty early on. He wasn't the first, but he did publish the music pretty early. Memphis Blues and some others. St. Louis Blues, the big one, of course. He told a great story. The kind of music he had been playing, he was, I believe, classically trained, and he was playing like what we would call society affairs at the time, which I would take to mean he was playing for white people at the turn of the 19th, 20th century. Okay, and that too. Okay. Yeah. Okay. And he didn't even know what blues was at that point, and they were playing somewhere, and when on their break, a group of blues musicians came in and played, and the people went wild for it and started throwing money to him. He didn't even know what the music was. And he also had another quote that he made in 1903 in Mississippi. He was at a train station waiting for a train. And there is a African-American blues guitarist. He doesn't know that he's a blues guitarist. And he's playing slide with a pocket knife on the strings. And Handy described it. I wish he would have written it down. Guitarists and people I teach would have loved to know what those lyrics were that he was playing, but he didn't think to do that. But he was very taken with the lyric, which is where the Southern crossed the dog, which was referring to railroads in Mississippi. But Handy described it as the weirdest music he ever heard, and he said that the sliding of the knife on the strings reminded him of Hawaiian music. So he had no reference to it. This is 1903. He had no reference to it. Of course, he understood its value and did look into it, and he wrote all a lot of the early classic songs. And I think that's what I would like to add.
So I think that we're about to wrap this panel discussion up because we have a really amazing young group of performers coming out, and I'm sure somebody else is going to introduce them, but I just want to thank Regina Mullen, who is in the process of developing a blues magazine called Passway. So be on the lookout for that. Dr. Hunter, for your invaluable insight. Thank you so much. I'm so happy. Oh, yes, please.
If you want to know more about what I've discovered in the music, I got 3 volumes out called Death of the Negro by Hunter. It's on Amazon, Death of the Negro. It's 3 volumes. The 3rd volume is nothing but blues aesthetics. It's all philosophy. It's showing how blues has a basic philosophical underpinning of the music and that it can be explained. So that 3rd volume is used as a text in Bulgaria and in Greece at the major universities. I delivered it at a conference in those 2 states years ago, and they individually asked me if they could use it for their Department of English class. and I permitted them to use it. So if you want to read some deep stuff on blues, if you really think it is very simple, when you read this third volume of Death of Zendigo, you'll find out it is not at all. It is probably one of the most original, most complex musics that is around, that gives you a simple 3 tones to begin with. And after that, you can go anywhere with it. What your imagination can create, it allows you to do. That's what makes it so different. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hunter. So I just want to say, to wrap it all up, blues is music of the soul, and blues is celebratory music. So tonight is an opportunity to celebrate the greatness of this energy called blues. And I'm not just talking about the music. I'm talking about the aesthetic and the history and the cultural aspects. And so I think everybody here is special. I really do. I think that everyone here is really special that they showed up for this. Because, this is not like going to the movies. This is something much more exciting and much more organic experience. So, Dr. Hunter, Pat Tandy, Dave Rubin, thank you all, and we're going to have a fantastic night. So, blues is dance music, y'all, so don't feel like y'all got to sit there and not move, because blues is dance music.
Actually, I have a question. Actually,
Question.
I want to know, are there any questions? If the audience have any questions or would like to say anything?
Okay. Any questions from the audience? Or answers?
I was trying to research what is this thing. I heard you mention a couple of times what the music does when you feel it. What is the tone? What is the word that you ascribe to the word feeling? I was doing some research and I saw one word, F-R-I-S-S-O-N, and then there was another word, A-S-M-R, to describe, the goosebumps you get on the arm, or, Can you explain?
Would somebody like to answer that? Dr. Hunter? Do you want to restate your question,
Yeah, and a
please?
little loud. You actually can come up to the mic, perhaps, so we can all hear you.
Can you come
Yeah,
up?
She wants to know what the feeling is. It's really, I believe in the words that say what they say, and feeling says that there are no other words that express it as well as feeling. It's an emotion that is very subjective, and that's how jazz differs from other music. You, as the aficionado, as the gopher, as the person who listens to it, you didn't make your decision based on what the person is doing on stage at the moment in terms of his or her improvisation. And those are all subjective things that come to you. But subjectively, everyone arrives at a feeling of goodness when they go to a good concert and hear the performer perform in a magnitude of ways that they never thought could be done. So the feeling is, don't worry about all those other words. It's like saying deconstruction to say signifying. We were signifying for generations. Europeans came along with it and called it deconstruction. And I said, ain't that something? We've been doing that on a street corner ever since I can remember. And now someone is giving it another term, and it's considered to be a whole other construct. No, deconstruction is signifying. Feeling is feeling, so just take it with that. Thank you.
I'd like to know,
Okay, anyone else?
Over here.
I'd like to know, I've been doing the Blues Festival now. This is the 9th year. And, can you guys hear me? Thank you. And when I think about the blues, it reminds me when I was a little girl down south, 5, 6 years old. I'm from Sylvania, Georgia. And I know my relatives that raised me, we had extended family. My aunties and uncles and all that stuff raised me. And they used to work real hard during the week, at the sawmill and at the farm and, all kinds of stuff. And then on Friday, the guy that raised me actually he was my cousin, but I called him my father. And he would work hard, and he didn't have a lot of education. But on Friday, he signed his check with an X, and he went down to a place called the Bottom, and you know, like the Juke Joint, and he was down there along with all of my aunties and cousins and my cousins' cousins and so forth, and they were like having a great time. You know, they like forgot about all their worries that they had during the week and working hard for the man or whatever, and they went down and jumped and they heard music by B.B. King and Muddy Waters and all these other people, and they had a good time. They were slopping and doing whatever else they did. You know, they forgot about their worries. And I was a little girl, but we would all hang out together. You know, I was like 6, and you know, we had a good time. They'd be frying fish and chicken and drinking little 25-cent and 50-cent shots. And they had a great time with this music. And that's me down south. And I wanted to create that feeling because it made me feel good and it made me happy. And so I wanted to create that same feeling up here where I live in Brooklyn, New York. But oftentimes when I walk the street, and I've been given these festivals, and I'll go up to a person of color, a black person, not all the time, but oftentimes enough, and I said, hey, I'm giving a blues festival. You like blues music? Nah, I don't like that kind of music. No, I don't live that way no more. And I don't really quite understand that. I just really don't understand. You don't have to like blues music, and I guess I'm preaching to the choir because you guys are here. But if somebody could really, you know, like, tell me or something, I really just understand, because this blues music is our music. It's of us. So I don't understand why we don't really try to promote it more and tell our children about it, or listen to blues music at home and just really pass it on. So I wonder, you know, do you have any thoughts about, you know, what blues music is to you? Anyone here, anyone in the audience would, you know, like to make some kind of statement on that? It's just me. Here you go. I'm sorry.
Good evening, thank you, and thank you so much, Baretha. My name's Deborah. I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. The blues I know came out the Delta, and I produced a play about W.C. Handy called Down on Bill. I grew up, my experience was much like yours. Growing up with my aunts and cousins, we had a house where everybody came through. Coming down from Mississippi, they stopped at our house in Memphis, going up to Chicago, you know. So I got all that, and I love it, and I do try to pass it on. The thing about Memphis now, Down on Bill, it's like everything else. Harlem ain't the Harlem that we knew, that y'all knew when y'all were, you know, I'm not from here. Bill ain't the Bill I knew either. You know, they take it and they move it over somewhere and marginalize it, or it's made to look like it came from somewhere else and belonged to some other people. Down on Bill, they used to have a handy park, and all of the neighborhood people, the street people, as we would say, with the no teeth and the harmonicas and the combs, and they'd be at the park, and they'd be playing the music, and somebody with a pan or a pot, and you just walk through there, and you know, you hear it. And growing up with it, you sort of take it for granted. But as a little person, it was amazing to me, because these weren't clarinets and saxophones, and they were things, and these people were making music and making sounds, and my grandmother would drag me along. Come on, you girl. You know, but it stuck, you know. I just want to say, but now, you go into the clubs down there, it's none of that. You don't see the older people, you don't see the soul. But it's, you know, I used to be upset that it's like no black people want to play music and the blues in the clubs. It's like freshmen in college, little white freshmen in college, and I'm not to this is not to disparage, but it's just like we don't want to be associated with the music anymore. That's just strange to me. So if you like it, it must be played in your homes, out in the street or whatever, so that people can hear it, and we do have to support it. The other thing I want to say is that we talk about blues in the diaspora, and I would see how much it has infused all kinds of music, but I never liked country and western. But there was a time you couldn't hear, you only had one black radio station, and it went off at 6 o'clock. So then you got all this other stuff coming in on the music, you know. So all you could listen to was country and western, but I never liked it. But when I heard Ray Charles sing Cold, Cold Heart, when I heard Aretha sing Cold, Cold Heart, when I heard them sing, what's that song? Some song by Loretta Young. But once we get a hold to it, you know, it's the blues. So I then realized the country western wasn't nothing but the blues either. It just sounded a little different. Because you had down there from the Delta and Tennessee, you had the hillbillies up there in the hills. They had the blues. They had the blues and still the blues. You know, so I just wanted to share that. The country western is the blues too. And let's just go on and every day have the blues.
So if anyone else wants to say something, please do, because I really want to get the youth ensemble out here because I want to get them on the news. Okay? So anyone else want to make a contribution before we switch gears? Yes.
Well, I'll say this. Every generation has to have its own heroes. Every 4 years, you know, another graduating class comes through, and those freshmen are listening to new music that the seniors have already, you know, it's already old school, as it were. Having said that, when we look at things like Shakespeare, or if you want to talk about the blues, the music that actually lasts, the songs that speak mostly to us, exists because every generation is able to embrace it and make it their own. And that's the next step. When I used to see Honey Boy, I remember he was playing in B.B. King's, and we had hired a backup band to play with him. And they were so used to modern blues, they didn't realize, and Honey Boy would throw in an extra 1 or 2 phrases, and the band was ready to hit the bridge. And Honey Boy would look at them like, not yet, not yet. But, and it's the same thing when I used to listen to bluegrass. It used to sound like a bunch of cats in a bag being thrown in the water. But all of a sudden, it got smooth, and it got slick, and suddenly it started speaking to everybody. So the one thing that I'd like to add to this is that the blues, as you talked about it being organic, is a form of sound that new generations are going to discover. Just like the Rolling Stones did. I mean, the British invasion came along, the American blues you know, sound was not being heard in America.
That's right.
But they heard it in England, and they started, you know, redoing these songs. And suddenly the baby boomers embraced the blues. And suddenly all these clubs showed up. Well, you know, in New York, we've watched these clubs come and go. Chicago blues. I mean, there's so many clubs that I used to go to that disappeared over time. But that doesn't mean that it's over. It just means that eventually the next generation is going to come along, suddenly rediscover it, and then morph it to what they need, whether it be rap, poetry. It'll still be those same blues, and they'll wind up using those classic hits, the classic tunes that speak to everybody, the same way. I mean, a lot of people wrote books, but Shakespeare is the one that lasted. You know, I don't want to talk about the Bible now. We'll just stick with Shakespeare for a change. But having said that, you know, I believe that this is a style. It's like you said, it's an American art form, and as time goes on, it will survive. New generations will discover it, and it will make it their own.
Thank you. gentleman
Okay.
over there with the hat that raised his hand before, did you want to say something? Because we really have to wrap this up. Yeah. 'Cause we have,
Just a question.
okay.
But we call it the blues. Does blues mean sadness? Is it always identified, I got the blues because I'm sad, because I'm having tribulation in my life? Because you see, some of the songs that they sing do come from the heart and their personal experience in life. So you say blues, does it mean that I'm blue?
No, it's a tone. It's a way of speaking in terms of music. It's the minor tones. Minor tones give that flavor to song and to other musical forms. It's a way of you expressing whatever it is you're trying to say in a way that's going to allow other people to get the emotion that comes through it. So it doesn't always mean sadness. That's why I stated the jazz musicians, how they use the hard bop by Horace Silver. You can hear it in there. It's right there. That's all it is. Just modern day blues. When you hear Art Blakey, that's what you hear. So when you hear Charlie Parker, that's all he played. He couldn't play nothing but that. So it's like some people are giving it a title that has limited it in terms of people understanding. What I do in my office, I have my music on all the time, and people come in and sitting after a while, they'll say, "What is that?" I say, "Oh, that's jazz." "Well, that sounds good." "Yeah, I know." Why don't you use it? Why don't you use it to study by, to rest by, to listen to another mind? Okay, I gotta go.
Okay. Thank you so much, and we're going to proceed with the amazing young, big-eyed youth ensemble, and thank you all for joining us this evening. Let's party.
Okay, that ends part one. It was very exciting to have this panel discussion. I think everybody is really informed, more informed than they were. So that's the purpose of Jazz 966, to enter, to learn, and go forth to serve. And we're going to clear the tables off here.
I'm the MC. Angela Scott. Okay.
Okay.